Namaste, viewers from Jaipur Dialogue USA and Jaipur Dialogue India. Today we are going to talk about the much talked about dismantling global Hindutva agenda that some of the people, the misguided souls, if I may say so, were indulging in. That got dismantled with a fiery but very determined response by Hindus all over the world. And I know about America, so where it happened big time. Having done that, a thought occurred to my mind. So we succeeded in uniting and dismantling that entire agenda. Where do we go from here now? Is this one evening party over and we wait for the next such agenda to emerge to act? Or shall we get into a proactive mood to do something more positive? To discuss this matter with me, I have great pleasure in welcoming Mrs. Sujata Pandey, who is a political analyst and a former major multinational company brand strategy and media head. And I'm picked up a very important part of your persona that you are a proud organ donor. So that shows a wonderful part of your life. And then second one is Aabhash
Namaste.
Maldahiyarji, and who is an author, columnist, and a self-declared ex-Marxist who has written a book, Modi Again, which is going to come shortly. And it is incidentally, for full disclosure purposes, happens to be all three of us are Biharis. So it is virtually a Bihari Baitak. So let's kind of share with the entire story with the world. Where do we go from here? Many people say we don't have to dismantle anybody. All that we have to do is to spread the message of Hinduism, the message of Sanatan, to make ourselves more seen, felt, heard, and known, I would prefer to call. So, Sujata ji, I want to begin with you, not necessarily because it's ladies first, but I want to begin with you because you have been on the political side as well as the corporate side. So, as a corporate strategist, if what would you recommend to the Hindus to do? Where do we go from here? What next? That's a favorite question of mine. Wherever we are, where do we go from here? What next?
Uh, Thank you so much for inviting me on this show. It's a pleasure talking, and it's one of my favorite topics. And why I'll tell you why is because my generation and the generation which is younger than me are all asking this question: where do we go from here? Not just about this particular conference. So I'd like to go, if you allow me, go back a little, because before questioning, before asking ourselves what do we go from this point, I think we should ask, where have we come from, where are our roots, and what are we actually aiming to do. So I'll start with the first thing, that Hindutva or Sanatan Dharam cannot be dismantled, because it's been existing from centuries, and that's a fact. That's a proven fact. That's no longer a mythology, as to some of the scholars would like to say. It's been existing before any of these isms came into existence at all. They had absolutely no sign and proof of their existence when we existed, and this has been now proven. Another thing is that it it just not existed, it also evolved. It's like water, it took shape, it took size, but with the same DNA of those saptarishis, which spoke of inclusiveness, which spoke of Vasudev Kutumbakam. So that is very, very, and why I wanted to talk about is because today we youngsters are all confused about what is our religion, what do we do, where do we go and study. If someone is questioning our ideology, someone is questioning our ethos, someone is questioning and dividing us basis on hard Hinduism, Hindutva versus soft Hindutva, where do we begin from? So I think we must go back to our roots and understand first who we are, and why years and centuries of conversion subjugation could not even dismantle Hindutva. They could not even dismantle Hindutva when they burned our temples. They could not dismantle Hindutva when they converted, when they could not even dismantle Hindutva for when they made us slaves. Because Hindutva, like in Ramayana, once Marich, Ravan has a conversation with Marich and he says, how do I kill Rama? Tumarit says, you cannot kill Rama because Rama is not just a man, he's a concept. So Hindutva, for that matter, is a concept, and we must understand that. So when you say where do you go back from there, so I would see it I would divide it, and like you said, somebody says. That इसके बारे में बात ही क्यों करनी है? Why do we have to talk about dismantling? Why do we not talk about that what we already have? Let's start talking about it. I say both have to go together hand in hand, because it is a multi-level approach that we have to, because one, we have lost touch with our roots, and another, we have to be prepared for what's coming next, and it has to go together. So at a family level, we have to start knowing that what family meant. How do we bring back Hindu culture, Hindu text, Hindu scriptures, Hindu rituals, Hindu stories, Hindu verses, the mantras, etc. back to the family, and not when the child is ready to go to the college, and he's going to the US, and then you say, oh, you please, if you are going to US, but please don't leave Hinduism, follow my rituals. No, when a child is just learning, started to learn, we have to start from there. In fact, we should start from when we two people come together, understand the concept of marriage, why two people have come together, all of that according to Sanatan Dharma. Then you have to come to the social level, where you have to understand that dismantling is not happening in these institutions, that they have been doing from last whatever, how many years, that this propaganda has been going on. Dismantling is, if at all it is happening, or if you, for the loss of a better word, it is happening in our villages, it is happening in our tribal areas, it is happening in the people who are feeling left out. So we have to first stitch it together. We have to stop this discrimination in whichever shape, size, and color it is existing, in the name of caste, in the name of creed, in the name of religion, whatsoever, in our villages, in our houses, in our neighborhoods, in our country, there. And then you come to the economical part of it. I can say, teach, talk here that we should start going back to our roots. We should start Gurukul. We should start learning Vedas. We should know what are we capable of and how scientific is our religion, and tell it to the young generation. But they will not believe it if we don't, first of all, make them understand with logic, because today's generation is a generation of questions. They will ask you questions. You can't tell them a story and say, believe it because my great grandfather told me this, or it has been written. So you have to give them a correlation between the science and the logic and the text and the and our scriptures, or whatever is propagated. So having said that, and also make it financially viable, and because if they go back to the roots, what do they get back in return? Yes, it's easier said than done. Oh, there's been a lot of, for the sake of dharma, we should go back to our roots. We should start learning Vedas. We should start following our Sanatan Dharma's ethos. But will that give them a ticket to Oxford? Will that give them a ticket to Harvard or similar institution here in India, if at all we develop something on the lines of Nalandas and all, which we once had. So we have to make it economically and financially and job wise viable as well,
So,
and
so you,
then
you have said. Sorry, you are repeat. You are going ahead. Please go ahead.
sorry.
Please complete your
So
thought. Yes.
and then of course we have to start questioning the elephant in the room. Are we as a nation truly a secular nation? Do we really need it? Is it relevant in our context as a Sanatani Rashtra, as a majority, which one who already believes in Vasudev Kutumbakam and Sarve Sukhina Bhavantu, Sarve Bhayantu Niramaya? Do we really need it, or is it a copy paste. It is time to call out this copy paste word called secularism, which essentially meant separation of church and the government, which doesn't even apply to us. No, if you allow
Very
me, I
well
can
said.
probably
You
explain.
brought about you brought about a lot of issues here, and I guess that I give you the platform. You could be speaking for hours on this. So it's good to have, and we have to. This gives me a thought process that we have to change and adapt to things new that are happening. Like whether our studies are going to get people the material welfare that everybody is looking for. So Abhasi, coming to you on this issue, the dismantling thing, what drove my attention to was when Audrey talked about in a tweet invitation for that conference to understand the power and threat of Hindutva. So it made me chuckle, it made me laugh, and it got me angry. What power or what threat are we talking about, right? Do we actually pose a threat to anyone? What kind of a power structure do we have, whether from India or here? That just because we have many Indians who are CEOs of the company, and because 1.3 billion people in a committee of nations, where there are 150 Christian countries and 50 plus Muslim countries, how does one Hindu country become a threat to the global peace? So, as the saying goes, a fool is one who doesn't learn even from his own experience. So, what have we learned from this? And I believe we are not fools. We are much wiser than that. Where do we go from here? Is the same question. Where do we go from here now? Abashi.
So, yeah, Audrey tweeted about the threat, how Hindutva is a threat, and a lot of people on the day one started about talking about the Hindutva, and gradually it all boiled down to that other term, that is Hindu plus ism, Hinduism. And at the day one, when it was cited, and there were a lot of opinions brewing around that perhaps, okay, let's be quiet because it's attack to the Hindutva, which is the Hindu nationalism, and it has nothing to do with the Hindu plus ism. And why people have not got so inflated when the attack was directly on the Hinduism. Then I had said that, today they are talking about Hindutva, but actually the building of hate, what they are building, where the facade is the Hindutva as a term, but deliberately with the time they will go on to attack, and the core or the foundation of this building lies in the hate for what we know as Hindu plus ism, introduced in 1830s through affidavit. So Hinduism was not actually the word, so that's why I'm saying it's Hindu plus ism. Now again, this the way they have been meddling with the ideas right from beginning, whether actually if I trace back to the pattern in the history, it all comes with the idea of racism, that how the curse on the ham had actually created the idea of the racism in the Christian theology, which then race theory developed as a complete science. When Bernier spoke about the racism, then Kant has his own theories about the races, and deliberately the Hindus were talked about. Hindus, for them, it was a geographical connotation that time too, when they were talking about it. So what actually happens is that the question is that whom do we pose a threat to? The problem is that we don't pose any threat to anyone, and that's the biggest threat to those guys. Because as I had spoken the last time, that it is all about a nexus, and that nexus is about the unholy nexus of the church, communists, and the armed dealers. And for the armed dealers to run their business, they need the insurgencies. And for the insurgencies, they need the least of the Hindu ideas. The more the Hindu ideas will be there, the least of the insurgencies will be there. So it's more of a commercial angle to it as well. And I always believe, and my analysis always lets me conclude also, that this whole academia is one of the arm of this whole nexus, while the armed dealer being the other one. They both buttress each other in this whole journey where they're building this building of the hate, which is buttressed upon with these two basic sources. Now, yes, are we really dismantling that, or we are really constructing something? So again, we are getting into the may of the word. Like I saw a few tweets also where it was said that we are not supposed to dismantle or whatever. I always believe, and I have always said that, like I have always stood against the idea that Hindutva is only the idea which is something that resists. I have always compared Hindutva with, or rather the Hinduism or Hindu idea with water, something which just takes the form relative to the temperature of the climate it is in. When the climate will be hot, definitely I will need a cold water. The temperature needs to come down. When the temperature is really lower, I need warm water. It doesn't mean that H2O is separated or it became something else. It is still H2O, right? But does the thing happen? So this exactly was what Hindutva has always been. Now we have to get off the track from these notions of lexicons, the words, and the terminologies, and we need to focus on the right ideas. The right idea is to really understand that where we are currently standing right now. We see that a lot of Hindu awakening did happen post 2014, and I have no shame in addressing it. Though a few days back, there were a lot of backlash on. So when I wrote it on Twitter that from 2014 onwards, there's a lot of Hindu awakening among the people, and I see that from 2019 onwards, this has really strengthened a lot more, which is very important. And I see that the very positive changes are coming, and we have been able to hit right where it's required to be hit. Like it for last 2 years, before 2 years, the things were not so prosperous in terms of the material which we are creating, the kind of material which are being created by from our side. Like for example, J. Sai Deepak's book, where he has written the book where he has given the whole construct of how the mind is still colonized and how the colonization happened, and all those ideas are really brewing up. Then in terms of biography, so Vikram Sampath had come up with this beautiful book on the Savarkar. He just finished it. Again, on the other side of the politics, Pawan Verma has come up with a beautiful book on the great Hindu civilization. So I see that some very important urgent ideas are really brewing up, and this is something which was lacking quite a few years back. We all had certain rage, we all had certain activism, but activities were not happening. So the ground has been set. We need to build upon it and further get a bit onto the offense. When I say offense, it means that I want to follow the exactly the model of the colonialist right now. Like I have started looking also into the idea of how Islam started, and I have been questioning that there was no Makkah and there was. So my idea is something very different. I have begun to look into the ideas of Christianity as well, and I have been challenging the idea of whether Jesus existed or not. I'm challenging every, like, what happens is that if someone asks you that what is I'm taking this from the works of Dr. C.K. Raju. If someone asks you that what is your date of birth, you say particular year. So what is that year? That year is nothing. Say I am born in 1988. So 1988 means 1988 from AD. That is Anno Domini, the year of the Lord. So we are still so much colonized. We just need to, we are loudly stating that yes, it's the era of the Christianity, and there are a lot more things. So we need to really do some very serious working on the decolonizing project, and it should not happen with the rages, but it needs a lot of literary works and a lot of academic works and a lot of research-based constructs which needs to pour in. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And that brings me to the subject matter which you both of you have brought out very clearly, that we need to change, we need to adapt. And one of my favorite quotes of Eric Hoffer is that in the times of change, in times of transformation, the learned are equipped with the knowledge that is no longer relevant, but the one who adapts, he survives. So he contests the theory of survival of the fittest to the theory of proposition that it is the one who adjusts fastest is the one who actually survives. Coming back to the same thing, I was talking about the how to propagate and how to establish ourselves. What I find is, basic question that comes to my mind is, why do people fear us, hate us? Why there is so much of phobia, which has converted itself into a misia? Where do we fit in? If you want to change, and we give this actual example in our corporate work, that if you ever done painting of your house or your room, you have to ensure first to remove the old paint. So you scrape the past, the old paint, before the new paint can be put in. Otherwise, the new paint will also peel away with the old one. So we have to do some scraping off of our own way, the way we are. We need to scrape away some of the old fissures that exist on our body politic. And which I find is very important is we do not confront the truth. We don't even ask the question. Aabhash was talking about it. So Sujata ji, what I find is that our Vedic principles are very scientific, are remarkably scientific, which comes into direct conflict with the fear and ignorant driven organized religion that exists, right? But they are very organized. They are organized for a purpose. We are not organized because we believe this is the world that it is. So here is a very important pointer which came to my mind: the climate change. People ridicule us when we say Dharti Mata, right? But climate change is all about saving the planet, isn't it? And I tell my American friends and others that if you want to have authentic peace in the world, all that you have to do is to adapt Sanatani and Hindu philosophies, even if you don't want to convert. And that is respect and acceptance. Accept the fact that Dharti is a Mata. Why we call Dharti Mata? Because it's mother's resources who we use. It is mother gives us the resources without even asking a question. Her love for us, for all her progenies, is absolutely unfettered. How do we take that message forward? What organized effort we need to do, even if not necessarily institution building? Where must we change internally to do that externally?
Is it only for environmental issues that are you asking the
You
question
pick
for?
your subject. My panel is open. You can pick your thought. I gave you an example of the climate change. That's it.
So, not only just climate change. So, like I said, it can't be a unidirectional approach. It has to be a
Right.
multi-directional,
Correct.
multi-level strategy. And I would call it strategy because if not now, when? The kind of
My
things that we
favorite
see.
phrase.
Yes,
If not now, when is my favorite
when
phrase.
because we have in 60 years, if you say, sorry, 60, 70 years, 75 years of independence, you see we have been completely, we've forgotten Sanskrit. Where is Sanskrit today? Absolutely gone. We have no trace of it. It is not required. It is not even a optional subject. So you see, we have to wake up, and Sanskrit is just one little example of it. Whatever we have to act, we have to now come together. We have to come together for, and we have to decide our issues. Because everybody is carrying a flag of Hindutva, which is of different shades and with different agenda. We have to prioritize which is a bigger agenda. Is the bigger agenda is talking about Hindu or Sanatan Dharma and establishing the philosophies of it and reclaiming your lost morale, because it was your morale which was broken. It was the morale which was broken by colonizing our minds, like what Abha just said, that our minds are so colonized in every aspect, right from our systems, our judicial system, our law, our the terminologies that we call the people who we think that they have done well enough. Like, our minds are still very, very colonized. So we have to start calling it out. Like, for example, some of the things that you read in the books, while we are growing up is about sati system. You read about child marriage, and things like that, and it is made, it is written in a way that the children who come out of those schools and call, and read after reading those books, they feel that, hey, my culture was very oppressive, my culture was not respectful to women. Whereas whoever tells me that, oh, there was a movement, and how sati movement was, sorry, sati system was stopped, and how it was rampant in India, I have only one question: when Dashrath died, did all the three Rani become sati? Where in any of our ancient scriptures texts it's mentioned that once Raja died, the Rani went sati? You have one example, one instance of Madhuri in Mahabharata. That too, she did it by Sweksha, because she knew that she would not be able to do what Kunti did, and that was her own choice. Another thing about the girl child education, and why I'm talking this, Digi, is because when I do clubhouses on weekdays and all of that, forum called Global Indians, we get a lot of these young people who have gone to the universities in India and outside, and these are the simple little things that are thrown at them to feel them ashamed of their own roots, to propagate self hate, to talk, to tell them that, hey, you come from a caste privileged society, whereas the person doesn't even know what the caste is. And the easiest way to make you believe is give you stories, fabricated stories of sati system, fabricated stories of child marriages. Was Sita married at the age of 3? Was Sita not educated? Who went with Raja Dashrath in Devasur Sangram? Why do we have all the three Devis? The Devi of knowledge is Saraswati, the Devi of wealth is Lakshmi, the Devi of everything, bravery and whatever you name it, is Durga. Why Durga was created when there were men all around? They were men gods, right? They were all the three devas were there, isn't it? So the basic, like you said, the environmental. When we say Dharti Mata, when we go and worship our rivers, when we say Bargat ka ped mat kato, and then when we say, tree also has life, we go and worship Tulsi. It is all part of our system. So we have to now be, so like, this is why I said you have to bring these two ends together. They are right now in isolation. One is the scientific bent of mind, one is our ancient rituals and texts and heritage and scriptures and whatever we have believed and seen. Yeah, we have to bring it together for the young generation to understand and defend them when they will be questioned of their roots.
That's very well said. It's important for us to recognize that education, propagating the knowledge, our ancient knowledge, for you referred to Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Durga. I have always said to my Western colleagues, I always say that. I said, if ever there was an example of gender equality, it exists in our faith. Shiv and Parvati are the original examples of gender equality, right? The whole concept of Ardhanarishwar, it exists because we respect that part of it. Don't go by the burst of unfortunate events to say that we are the rape capital of the world. Coming back to Aabhash, after Sujata ji's need for us to educate people, there is one thing that there are two things which I want you to comment upon. One is the we don't propagate our values, that our religion is actually the only authentic, free, liberal belief system. Whether you pray or you don't, who you pray, how many times you pray, whenever you pray, we have complete freedom, because in our concept, we always talk about it doesn't matter who you are, what you do defines you. It's your karma that leads you to the next life. And it's a very simple example here. What I eat today, what I do today will determine my tomorrow. So So if I like a glutton, if I consume 2 kgs of gulab jamun or 4 kgs of biryani, it will hurt my body. I know where I will be tomorrow, right? Most likely. So we know the future is all in our hands. So we are scientifically based in terms of how what we do defines us. Whereas in other faiths, and I say this, whether you are a Christian or a Muslim, try to understand this. You are made to believe, you are demanded to believe that nothing else is true but what is in the book. It's how can question that? Who is? So those people, I have said this to my friends, you have not experienced freedom. We are free. The second one is, this is one thing that I want you to comment upon. And the second one is a caste thing. That's a whole big issue. That is one issue on which Indians and Hindus are attacked globally. And I have an answer which I have given, I have shared. But we'll come to the caste thing. But go ahead, Aabhashji, your call.
Yeah. So just picking on the point where Sujata ji left, it's very important that we really look back into our historical traditions. And historical tradition and precedents are always the best of the things for any project what you do. I, being an urban designer and an architect, I always go back to the precedents or the case studies of the past to come out to certain result. And I'm sure that it happens across all the professions. So when we look back at our history, there is always a conflict of ideas where in the past most of the Indologists have made a claim that the Hinduism, and especially when you read about the ideas in the period of the Sati, when the British were really suddenly the number which came up in the Bengal, which was 200x times than what was in the earlier times, the number suddenly went to the thousands, which were very minimal. Like you find a case into the 12th century, then you find in the 16th century, 17th century. It's very, and again, it can be debated what was the case, what was the reason, but the numbers were not so ginormous as it was. Suddenly the number got multiplied by 200 times. So somehow our Shastras also don't support this idea at all. There is no such idea that the way it has been represented as to be. Now, as far as the liberalism is concerned, I always had a thought, because again, liberalism perhaps might not translate to exactly something what we have to do in our own Indic tradition, but just because we are speaking in English, we are colonized, so let it be the liberalism. So I don't think for any of the liberal, Hindu idea, nothing better than Hindu idea can be a better ally, because when all the civilizations were actually misogynist, whether you look for the Egyptians, the Babylonians, and everyone. If I just look at my ancient text, that is Ramayana, and people don't, and Ramayana is always said to be like, again, Henri Trousquet abused Ram like anything. But it is a case in the second chapter of the Ramayana where the Vanvas is given to the Ram, and it's there in the Valmiki Ramayana. It's not from any version. So the Brahmin Valmiki says that when the Ram is going to the Vanvas, it's Sita who is going to sit on the throne. How would she would have sat on the throne had she not been so capable enough? How would Brahmin in the back then forget that whether Ramayana history or not? But certainly a book was written at least 3,000, 4,000 years, whatever it may be. Even if I go by the conservative thoughts of the leftists, it was written at least in 1000 BC, right? So when I say, let's call it not 1000 BC, 3000 BP, that is before present. I'm just trying to avoid using BC and all those terms to decolonize myself. So 3000 before present. So 3000 before present, a throne was offered to the queen, right? So this was our state of mind. Now, one thing what is very different in our civilization, which is unique, I would say, that is the bravery or the courage and the audacity of the thought which we all have. Like, again, when I go back to the Vedas, we have the thoughts where we say that, let the knowledge come from all the direction, right? When the people are living in the tribes and so many other things are there, you are very insecure about who is going to attack, and we are saying that let the knowledge drop in from whichever side it comes from. the Rig Veda, which is a central text, or let's not call central text because we don't have any central text. There are those Hindu philosophies which even went beyond Vedas, right? And so the Rig Veda, and we have that the creation hymn, where it talks about it really questions the existence of the God, and one might even interpret that it is talking about Nir Ishwarvad. Perhaps maybe that can be interpretation too, but there was no case of someone has become done a crime or something when Adi Shankara came in and he said that I am the Shiva. Then but when someone came up the idea of what Anil Haq, he was the atrocities went on against him. So we have seen across the civilization that it's the only Hindu civilization which has been very brave with the thoughts. The audacity has been very strong, very bold, with the given a standard of the time. And what you find, one thing common in all Hindu school of thought is the free will, which you never find in any other school of thought you pick from any civilization. It's existing nowhere. Now, coming to the sensibilities towards the ecosystem where we are living in, doesn't it come from a thought that West gave us a vacuum cleaner, but we had the concept of jhadu, the broom which we use, is because an ant shouldn't be killed. You will never be killing an ant or many other things. So our thoughts were very much, someone may argue that it was because of limitation of the science, but whatever it may be. But actually people never used to mop that much. In fact, the broom was something which was actually in much of a practice. So were all our practices. It was very much centered around that there should be a list of the deaths of the living creatures. There was so much sensitivity about towards the environment, the plants, the animals. Like, of course, everyone knows that we worship the animals, and that's why we have seen, in fact, we see the Ishwar everywhere, and that's the whole idea. And what really had always kept the outsiders confused, that these guys come up with the idea of Nirgun and Sagun, and despite that, they all call themselves somewhat, some coming from a similar sect. They all have the similar kind of gods. Everyone is worshipping Brahm. Someone is worshipping in a Sagun form. Someone is worshipping in a Nirgun form. So these ideas have always been very revolutionary, with respect to the ideas which have been existing in other parts of the world. So it has always been the brave thoughts of us which has made the distinction, and we need to pick on those lines, and we need to fix our lexicons, which is very important. That we have to start avoid using the when we talk about, say, Islam, we need to use religion exclusively, but when we are talking about Hindu, let's call it always dharma, right? We have to be righteous on our part. The moment we will begin to do it, the course correction will slowly and slowly happen. It will follow up. So we need a quite an aggressive approach in terms of really bringing in all sorts of ideas very boldly, which defines and distinguishes our civilizations broadly from the rest of the world.
Thank you very much. Sujata ji, I will come to you with a thought process about we living in the 21st century, right? We are living in the 21st century. We can rely upon our ancient wisdom, but we are living in the 21st century where technology has brought about such tectonic shift in the way we communicate. You are in Mumbai, Aabhash ji is in Bangalore, I am sitting in New York, and we are communicating live at the same time. So the real world is different. And what we find is that there is amazing relevance of our past teachings in the current time. So the one thing which comes to my mind as a corporate person for a very long time is that you have to play the game better, right? We have to play the corporate game or the rules of the game better than anybody else, right? It is the same bat and ball that we bat, field, and the bowling that happens in cricket or basketball. There is one basket that everybody rotates around with, but you have to play better to win. Now, that's what my thought process is. This is a conversation. It's not a one-time conversation. We will have it many more times because that narrative must reach everybody. So where do we begin to reflect within? Where do we need to get better to play the game better?
Okay, I'll try and combine what you asked, Abhar, also about the caste system. So I think we should
Yes.
begin from there as well.
Sure.
First of all, we must know, tell, propagate, and however you want to communicate, please communicate this. The word caste itself doesn't belong to us. It comes from a Portuguese word called casta. Also, we didn't have a concept of caste system, which as what is being blamed on us, as we are the caste privilege, caste oppressor, etc., etc., etc. Sorry, I'm diverting
Please,
a little
please,
from your
no worries.
question. But we had the system of, it was a social system where one caste was determined, if we have to call caste now, is by your work, by your karma. And there are numerous examples when a Kshatriya became a Maharshi, a Maharshi became a rule. Sorry, Brahmins don't have it, and the Shudra became a ruler. A Yadav became a ruler as well. And then there was also the Shudra also was elevated because of his karma. There's lot of examples of it. So first we must know that this caste system and this entire propaganda or conspiracy that to call us as a caste privileged society or a casteist society is entirely a tool of colonizing our mind and breaking our morale, and also, like I said earlier as well, teaching our children self-hate. That is very, very important to understand. So I'm not going too much into details of what the examples and all of it, because that will take a lot of time, but I think it's
Yes.
important to mention that. And in the similar thread, you call out the propaganda, $1 million business, which is now today as smashing Brahminical patriarchy and fabricating stories on the name of the Brahmins where the reality is otherwise. So we must call out these things very, very clearly and in the loudest possible ways. And it's an irony, Vibhuti, when these things are being spoken about, where the Jack Dorsey also stands with a placard saying that smash Brahminical patriarchy. I'm not very sure how much he knows about the Brahminical system at all, but he stands with a placard with the Equality Lab people. Why are we going soft on Islamic radicalization? That needs to be answered. Now, coming back to your question of how do we play better? I think any nation, when it decides to play better, or when it decides that it has to become the powerful nation, or wherever, Vishwaguru or whatever, it has to develop a national consensus. And national consensus will not develop if we only depend upon the government policies, and we depend upon, because we have elected this government, so it will do all the things that were not done for these many years. I think it starts with us. It starts with each one of us. And like I began, it starts with us, first of all, wearing that pride again. It starts with us by equipping ourselves with the logics where we can go and answer people who question our ethos. It begins with our parents not telling just our children to be economically independent, but also culturally rich. It begins with our society, where we just don't talk about policies and schemes which the government gives to the unprivileged and deprived society, deprived class, but we also form an ecosystem wherein we help each other so that they can uphold their dharma too. When we talk about and question people, why this particular person or this particular village has fully converted, why have we not questioned why did one person change its entire belief system, entire tradition, what they have known, done, seen till now, just with a rice bag. Why it has come to that? If we can donate for someone, and it is very silly, but I have seen people asking for donation for their laser treatment of their hair on their face, etc. But I have not seen people donating for the small pujaris and pandas when they were dying, literally, when lockdown was there. These are the questions we
We have
must ask.
that's
We have to
a very
internalize.
yes, internalize. That's right. That's what I have been talking about. That where do we begin the change? And I believe that we can't depend on government for all changes. It happens with us. And one of the
And
key things
government will, sorry, the government
sorry, go
will
ahead.
do things. Sorry for cutting. Government will listen to you if your voices are united. If we all come together,
To use the economics language, if you create a demand, then the government will supply. The demand and supply of
Of
trade.
course. Today we ourselves are becoming an ecosystem. When we are
Correct.
saying, hey, don't question that person, don't question that party, and don't question this because there is no better than them. Yes, there are no better than them. I also understand that. But then, a good Raja was the one whose mantris were good. Vikramadit had Ratn in his chamber, and that's why he was Vikramadit.
Right.
So we
Aabhash,
must
coming to
question.
you, must question. My favorite word is that we have to begin inquiring. We have to
Yes,
begin demanding reciprocity. Why is it something happening? So if somebody tells me, I question that. I make inquiries. There is a way to ask a question, and I ask my Muslim friends and Christian friends that, look, if you are not free within your own faith, don't blame us for that. That's your privilege or your right or your choice to exercise. But the bigger question comes up again for us, like we have to become individual. That's what Bhagavad Gita teaches us. That's what Krishna tells Arjun, that there is an individual and a collective thing. Arjun was the warrior, and then the Pandavas were a team, and the entire, the battle was won by a team with exemplary individual performances in the moment that we are there. But one thing that bothers me, Aabhashi, and I want to come to you because you are a self-declared Marxist also at one time. And that question I want to hear from you from that point of view as well. How is it that despite all the knowledge and wisdom that exists in our life and texts and everything, how did we allow this branding of our Varna system to caste? How did we allow the women to be denigrated in the Indian society where Christianity and Islam gives no privilege to women? On the contrary, they are still suffering, looked down upon. Look at what is happening in Afghanistan. I mean, the women have been told to stay at home. How can a country or a society develop if 50% of its population is told to shut down? Tell me about that part of Abbasji. How did we allow that to happen? Why we did not
See,
use our? Why do we blame that उन्होंने मेरे साथ ऐसा किया? मेरा सवाल है हमने वैसा क्यों करने दिया? We all three of us are here by choice. Nobody forced you. I invited you, you accepted my invitation, and you are here. You can't blame me for being on the show. You can blame the technology for a screw up, perhaps, but you can't blame anybody for this entire thing. So, when will we stop the blame game and take responsibility for everything that has happened to us? That would be a real dismantling of our way, the way we have become, succumbed to everything Firangi, succumbed everything outside. Think about it. It bothers me immensely when I read Gandhi saying that if Muslim comes to kill you, let them kill you. I mean, what kind of a man was he? Who was he speaking for? And if after knowing what we know now, if we don't realign our forces and thinking, who will help us? This is the last question of the day, then I will have a quiz for both of you. Go ahead.
so as far as the social system is concerned, we somehow this has always been used against us in the whatever way the colonialists will wish to do. and I will not even blame the colonialists, because they were out on a mission, whether you started from Columbus or Vasco da Gama and you read their text. It has always been about the notion to convert more and more people. And of course, and every world was society divided into the society. When I say that, I did hear an argument that it was only the caste system which saved the Indians to not become completely converted, and the names were put like the Egypt, the names were put like the Persians. There were multiple names which were put. And then, but the irony is that people are not aware that even Egypt was divided into the system of the caste and society. The societal differences were there too. Same was with the Persia. How did they convert so easily if it was in play there too, but it didn't register? So it's a very falsified claim that it was caste which was saving the conversions from the conversions to happen. Now, how actually British destroyed the whole system? There are two aspects. One aspect is a system being in a place, and the other aspect is the fallacies in the system. So any system can become a devil if the fallacies start coming into it. Like, even if, say, for example, for a moment we assume that there was a caste system, let's assume it as a case A. And if there was no atrocity based on the class struggle, because the class struggle, I always say that Marxism is something which works on an equation which has a constant, and that constant is a class struggle. The moment you remove that class struggle, that equation fails. And that is how all the Westerners have always looked. It was not only the Marx was also very highly influenced by the Judeo-Christian text. Not many people would know, because his idea was also very much based on the idea of creating the world based on the book of David. His own historiography was based on the idea of David. So that is how even he was looking the world as. He had no clue about India at all. And all the Westerners definitely had no clue about India, that what the societal system is. And even if what happened, that they picked across the whatever ideas they could, like our William Jones, the very famous guy, came to be known as the Pandit William Jones. Not many people might be aware about it. Yeah. So he got a lot of things commissioned. A lot of works happened. And again, the whole interpretation started happening based on the ideas propagated by the colonialists like the Kant and the many others who were, the whole idea was the caste was being seen here as with the idea of the races. And in fact, there is no caste as such. It was a jati, which even Panini speaks about. And then he talks about that the jati is something which comes out from a single source. So the common source which leads the chain, that is jati. So a plant species hoga, jati hoga, and then the same will happen. So it can branch out. That is how he was looking at it as. And then with the time, and there's a concept in architecture and urbanism which is called the principle of human settlement. If one studies principle of human settlement, one will know that the jatis were developing more and more frequently because of the proximity of the places where the people of similar profession were living in. So say, for example, they're the people who are used to wash the clothes. So they were eventually living near the rivers. Nadi ke paas rehte the, and that would really, so all people will concentrate at their place, and there was not much of a transfer of the what you can say resources so much. The wave was not so spread like how today I can have access to any kind of knowledge, irrespective of I can learn about metallurgy, and I can learn about the chemistry, and the multiple things which I can learn just sitting over here. And in fact, but this was not the case back then. So eventually the system was working there as such, but there was no such thing called atrocity. Now, and why I say that there was no such thing called atrocity initially, I take two very distinct period cases. One case is from the Dharampal's work, the great Gandhian, where he says that, even in fact in the schools there were more Dalits. In fact, so-called Dalit is not a very appropriate word, but again, it's a common lexicon. So they were also into the school. And when I quote Megasthenes or Strabo, they saw no slaves in India. I'm talking about the two distinct phases. One is before the great Christ was born, and one phase very close to us. So a span of around 2,000 years. Now, yes, but again, if I go on to say to someone who has faced the atrocity, ki boss, there was no atrocity, nothing happened against you, everything was so rosy and everything was so fine, then also it will not be so good. I have seen the cases in the villages. I come from Hazaribagh and nearby villages where I have seen that Brahmins have been suppressed and so have been the other caste people based on the power issues of the certain period. There are certain group of people who are very predominant in certain villages. Jisko basti bulate hain hum, we call it basti. And then the atrocity will be more be the power center. It will not be just because you come from a certain caste, so that is how it's gonna be. A certain caste has got certain power. That's why he will, and that mentality perhaps I see that just crept into the minds perhaps around the medieval periods, because we have some instances even recorded in the works of the Mughal emperors, because right now I'm working on the Mughal, so I'm very closely aware of the primary sources. So they talk about it. Now, to stop the conversion, what is very important is to get our temples back. It is very important because the missionaries have a system of school. They say कि भैया आप convert हो जाओ, आपको school मिलेगा, आपके बच्चे को ये मिलेगा, वो मिलेगा, वो मिलेगा. We don't have that missionary thing. मतलब again, missionary won't be a very appropriate, but we don't have that system where, because the temples are not in control of the people or one who could do, or in fact, even if it is in the control of the government is not keen to really use a temple for certain good for the Hindus. It's going somewhere in some other direction. We need to get our temples back. The moment we will get our temples back, the ecosystem will start improving. And I do understand that what they are doing in the name of missionaries, perhaps we can do the reverse. I'm a very anti-reservation person, but a week back I heard Sai Deepak, and what he said was very interesting. And he said that, reservation also is kind of acting as a tool to stop the conversion at times. This was, and then I'm again in the process to read the thing what he's talking about, and I want to collect more information about it. But we need something very radically different approach to really counter the agenda by which the organization like the Joshua projects are working. Their whole one, if one opens Joshua project website, he will know that what kind of work they are doing. We are nowhere close to them. So we are up against some big enemies. It's not so simple, and it will require some very complex solution. The solution will not be too simplistic.
That's a very valid point, that the solution will not be simplistic. As we are coming to the end of the show today, wanted to say that there are 3 questions that have come about. So I will request the console to put up the questions one by one. But I wanted to say this very, very, very seriously. The need for internal reform within us is key, both as an individual, as a collective, is key. Because the attacks are very venomous, very determined, and they are meant to hurt us. So that's one thing which is very important. We have to begin to prepare ourselves. The second part is that I notice that the Western media, the Hollywoods and others, they are very receptive to our ideology and our belief systems. And I will share with our audience and you people the way I explained why we have so many gods in our system. And I was watching the movie Avengers the Endgame. And I told them, have you thought about Avengers the Endgame, in which the villain or the evil is so powerful that the individual valor of every single entity was not enough to defeat the evil. And thus, a unity was created to defeat that evil. And every single element of universal power was brought together to destroy the evil. And I said, that's a similar story we have. When Rakta Bij came up with something, Kali was created, Durga was created. To address a particular evil, you have to create a new construct to defeat it. It's just as, and I brought it down to a very rudimentary level, that just as you don't go to the same doctor for treatment of all your illnesses, you go to many doctors to treat your illness. And that's what is important. So I was going to say to you the last question before the questions come up is it's a quiz actually. This is a thought came to my mind, which I read somewhere. So I will acknowledge that. Those who want, those who God wants gone, he makes them mad first. You agree or you don't? I'm repeating that. Those who God wants gone, he makes them mad first. And I'm seeing that around the world. So what do you think about that?
My answer will not be very straight, and the whole thing is that I always say that there's a conflict between the civilization, and that conflict is between the God-fearing people and the God-discovering people. And
And God loving people. I always say
God,
these are God
yeah,
loving people.
yeah. So we somehow are the amalgamation of the people who are not sure whether God exists or not. We are the people who see that the God exists and love them, and still we all are Hindus, and that's the whole about the Hindu philosophies. And somehow, whatever happens to God, the Hindus will not get baffled. The whole the construct of the other world will be turned upside down if the gods are gone, and they will not only go mad, but they will. I don't know what more can happen if suddenly the chapter of God is just erased from their life.
Sujata ji, you now. Same
So,
question. Yeah.
so I would like to look at into what Gita says, and also try to equate it with today's, so like you said, ours is a religion, ours is a, I wouldn't even call it a religion, it's a way of life. It's a lot of things together. It's a melting pot. It's a religion, it's a ritual, it's not a ritual, if you believe it, you don't believe it. So I see our God and their God. The two major differences. One is a God which is jealous. Their God, I am the one who's Alpha and Omega. Allahu Akbar, not inclusive. When God says Soham, that means you are the Brahm, and I am in you. It is inclusive. It is in you. I also say Vasundhara Kutumbakam. That means everybody is there. And then the God also says, in Gita, Bhagavan says that if you believe me, believe in the way that comes naturally to you. But even if you don't believe me, even if you don't worship me at all in your whole life, I will not question you because you are born from me and you're part of me. And what you're doing is because of your karma, of your past life, etc., etc. So it's a very complex mix of things, and that is why perhaps our gods don't make us mad. They don't even they don't even question you. They give you choices. They tell you this is the path you should follow, and this is where you'll reach. You can also follow this path, or you can discover new path, but at the end you will reach to only one place.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
sorry, this,
No, go ahead. Finish your sentence,
no,
please.
that's it. I mean, I'm just,
Now we have come to the end of the program as we have stepped beyond an hour, and we have about a couple of questions, which I think about 6 of them. So before we go to the questions, request to all the viewers, like, subscribe, and support Jaipur Dialogues and Jaipur Dialogue USA. Those of you who are signing up with Jaipur Dialogue India, please do click on Jaipur Dialogue USA as well and support us, because we are here on your behalf to show you and make an honest attempt to create a narrative that encourages you to be who you want to be, what you want seen. Because, yes, it is very difficult to change things because change happens within us. And change is a process where a commitment needs to be made. So I always say this, whether you are a vegan, vegetarian, or ahimsa ke param pujari, if your family is attacked, if you are attacked, you will have to rise and protect yourself and protect your family. You know, for that purpose, you have to be in a state of readiness. You won't just get up to play cricket in the stadium. You have to practice at the nets. You have to do things. You have to practice, learn, relearn, and implement. So, with these words, I want you to support us, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And now I will request the questions to come about. Uh, Very interesting questioner. His or her name is an unreal production. Thank you. Hindus are shy of using force. You read Gita, but still need convincing, like did Arjun. Thank you very much. You asked the question and you gave the answer. So, if you want to comment on this, either one of you, go ahead.
I think it is self-explanatory because everything in Sanatan Dharma is decided uh, according to Desh Kal Paristhiti. Nothing is absolute. Nothing is written in a book. Nothing is written if or but, my way or highway. It's always seen with the context of the place, the context of situation, and the context that what a righteous man would do at that particular time. So I
And
think this is what the Gita is all about.
very true. And just to add to that, is that yes, Bhagavad Gita and Ramayana are both examples of that you have to fight for dharma. It's about dharma yudhan. It's not going and fighting and killing for just for the fun of it. So it's not inquisition. It's not what do you call jihad. Or it's not a crusade. It's about dharma, that you have to protect dharma. It's always a defensive, offensive war, and that's what it is. So I totally agree with you. Next
I
question,
can I just add a bit on this?
please do that.
One of the things that we must understand, we saw Krishna giving up Updesh to Arjun, saying that he should pick up his sword and go for the war. But we don't, and we never noticed that Krishna had choice. He had Sudarshan Chakra. He had choice to finish the war at once, but he didn't do that because it was not his duty. It was not his place to do what Arjun should be doing. So it is all about who should do it and who shouldn't, and making a right choice.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question, please. Same gentleman, Unreal Production. Talking of jati is navel gazing. Pick up the sword. Abbasji, my answer is very simple. Agree. Your answer to this.
Sword is again, it's all the play of the words, and I always say to the people that you just look at your Twitter feeds, right? And maybe that you would have written some 10,000 tweets. 10,000 tweets into 280 characters. How many words are these? If you just print them into the book, how many books have you written? So the whole point is that we just need to. Right now, the sword is nothing but the literature, because they also try to attack us through a conference, academic conference, and that is how they have been doing it. And whether you look at the work of Sheldon Pollock, you look at the work of Audacity, and whatever is just growing up. And in fact, there have been many occasions when I have made people like William Dalrymple agree to my point, Shashi Tharoor agreed to my point that no, boss, this is not right, and they have agreed that this is not the way. So unless you do this, nothing will happen. It's the literature which will save us, nothing more.
That's right. Next, please. Achinthyanath Saxena. Caste system was the most effective social security system of the ancient world based on socio-economic realities of those times. Like everything else, it decayed with time. Sujata ji.
I would agree with the first part of it because, like I was mentioning, that there was system, social system. I won't say caste system. It was based on varnas, and it was based upon the karma. And there was then there was no struggle. Had it been the struggle, Ram wouldn't have eaten the bear of Sabri, or if there was any division between the untouchability and touchability, etc., Krishna wouldn't have gone to places, people like Dalit's places and all that, and done things that then all the ranis that he got were not belonging to the caste that he belonged to. So yes, but then yes, it did not decay with time. It got mixed up very I would say systematically. It was done by Britishers to divide you, to divide us, and so that they can rule you better, so that they can strip you of your their identity. And once they left, they made sure that only transfer of powers happened, and whatever they wanted to do or they were doing, continued being done through your education system, through your intelligentsia, through your intellectuals, and through the economic status, the how India was stripped of its, the entire prosperity, and it was reduced to a poverty stricken land. They made sure this stayed, and it continues till now, isn't it? Because when our children read, we have read that how caste system was prevalent, how Brahmins were the original oppressors, how Dalits were not given rights, and it was only because of caste system that the entire problem of the world was created, even to the religions that were remotely connected with Hinduism. Because if you go to other societies as well, the Britishers have done the same thing in Africa. If you go to other societies, the Christians also have social systems. The one who could become, I mean, no, it's not like anybody can become a pope. There are it is fixed who can become pope and who cannot, who can be given as the upadhi of saint. Sainthood can be given to this person and not to this person. There is a concept of racism in the royal family of England, isn't it? The blue bloods and the non royal people. So what we are seeing through Harry
They're
and
known as
Meghan. So
commoners. They're known as
yes,
commoners, right?
communists. So we don't question that. So I would say every society, for the better means of to for it to exist and function in an efficient way, it had made certain rules. And over the period of time, it was told to us that these were the ones that were propagated in our culture, in our religion, which was not the truth.
If I
Thank
just
you. Next
may add to it, I'll just add a bit to it.
Please.
So, first of all, right now, in the given time, we really need to get over with this idea of this futile debate of whether it was based on birth or not. This is not going to make any sense. No one can tell you whatever was the truth or not. So, most of the time, I see people wasting a lot of energy just to decide that whether it's by birth or not. So, whatever it may be, it is not going to bring any effect because you are trying to look everything with a perspective of a birth, of what you are seeing the birth and death to be. But there were multiple dimensions of the time. With what respect to the time has been spoken about, whether that time was the time of the Brahma, when the Krishna is speaking about it, or what that time was, because people do come up with the argument also that this karma is of the past birth. So whatever it may be, certainly currently it's not going to play any role. So we need to just refrain from getting into it. And as far as the decay of it is concerned, even if it was a good system or great system, whatsoever it may be,
Okay.
right? So it's important to know that the hate for the Brahmins came from the Protestant movement, because the Protestant protested the priest, right? And the temples were declared that the place of the corruption. So our mandir also became the place of corruption when they came here. And the priest, who was a priest for them, of course, pujari doesn't mean priest, but again, the limitations of the word. So the priest, the Brahmin, became the oppressor by default, and that's how the narrative was peddled. So if one start looking into the idea of racism into the Christianity, they will find the genesis of this idea of the atrocity literature, which was actually built at 100 years before, when it came into being from the 1970s, when Nurul Hasan came into the picture, when the whole project of R.C. Majumdar was scrapped, where he had written a beautiful book of 11 book series of this based on the civilization that was to be translated into multiple languages. And when Indira Gandhi lost the election, Communist Party gave Indira Gandhi didn't win the election with a large majority. Communist Party gave the support, and HRD was keen for the communists, and they scrapped that idea, and the atrocity literature was embedded. So more than the British, from 1970s, the Mahol became even more horrendous.
Thank you for that wonderful elaboration. Next question, Ajintyanath Saxena. Many Hindu temples under government control are state temples built by kings, which transferred to new government after 1947. This proves India is Hindu nation. I think we can keep the answer short given the time frame part of it. Who wants to go for this? Okay. Aabhashi, आप बोलिए. You want to say?
No, again,
No, please go ahead.
Short answer, because we are running out of time now. Yes.
the it's cause of the whatever you call it a Hindu nation or not, it's not going to make a much of a change unless really Hindus really start making the difference. The differences which you spoke about a few moments back, those things need to come across, and of course the temples need to be freed from the clutches of the government. That's the one essential thing. That's all.
Sujata ji, you wanted to add something to this?
No, I think I was just saying whether we don't even need this concept to be as a Hindu nation or no, because today we are the majority, and if we follow our cultural roots, Bharat, that is India, or India, that is Bharat, will remain as a Hindu nation with its ethos intact.
I say, I take a step forward. I say Bharat, that was India. Or India, that
That
was
is true.
Bharat. Change
No,
karna hai.
we need to make those changes, little
We need to
changes.
make those changes. I mean, India also needs to adapt the
You know,
wokeism
our
culture.
constitution says so. You know,
Some
our
part of it.
constitution says so.
Some part
India,
of it.
that is but
Yeah.
yes, but we
So
have
we have to kind
forgotten.
of accept something. Anyway, next question is 72 virgin goats. Oh, thank you very much. He has a 5-letter question. Sword, sword, sword. Why not? Who wants to take the shot on this?
Words. Why not?
Agree. Okay. Thank you very much for that question. Ajintyanath section again, giving bribe of reservations, free education, and SC/ST Act to keep people in Hindu fold is a sure recipe for socio-economic disaster. Sujata ji, you want to take a shot at that?
It takes me back to the beginning of the question when I said we must question whether we are a secular country or we are a pseudo secular, because when the reservations are given on the basis of the religion and on the basis of caste, how can we claim that we are secular? So that is one point that we must. No, I mean, whether it is a recipe for disaster, I don't know, because the data says otherwise. The 40% of the OBCs, and there's a lot. I mean, this is also a reality that today we need to recognize two things. Probably not based on the caste system, but probably based on the economic status. Because there are people who are deprived on both sides of the spectrum. There are Brahmins who are struggling to meet the ends or to get 2 square meals a day, and there are Dalits who are still there. There are tribals who have not seen the daylight yet. So if we want to become the Vishwaguru, or if we want to become the global power, we cannot become with leaving few people behind. We have to take them all, including. But then we are living in a world where everything is so tangled, where politics has taken over, socio-economic structures. Everything is so messed up, and it's become a khichdi that it's difficult to say that these things will be done away in times to come.
Next question. Ajintyanath Saxena again. If Hindu temples are freed from government control, they should revert back to the Raj Parivars that built them, isn't it? I have only one thing to add to this. Is something I take off from your statement, Sujata ji, and either of you can answer. Is the fact that in Andhra, many states in India, the Maulvis are given a monthly stipend. Why won't Hindu priests be given a monthly stipend? It's a question, is an inquiry which is coming to my mind. Why are we discriminating against Hindus ourselves and not protecting the very teachers or priests, whereas we are doing so for other faiths? Any reason for that? Abbasji, you go first on this.
Actually, in Karnataka, Yediyurappa had started this process of giving the good salary as stipend. And of course, this needs to be done because of various reasons. First is that you need to have a level playing ground for all. If you're talking about that no religion will be discriminated and what's so not. Second, that you are already taking away the control of our mandirs. then of course, how do the system really works? Then the second part was that whether the temple should be given back to the Raj Parivar or not. This is something which I cannot really very comment very concretely upon, because I don't have a very clear views on it. I just have an idea that right now, of course, the temple needs to be freed, because I see them as the counter forces to the missionary activities of the churches, because that I see will really help us control the conversions, like whether it's for rice bag or whatsoever it may be, that will bring the change. So,
Thank you. Sujata ji, you want to add? This is the last question of the day, I think.
I think sorry, but was the question about the freeing
The
temples
question
and
was,
going back to the
that,
Raj Parivar?
temple freedom and all that stuff. Go ahead. Please, can you put up the
There
question
is
again,
no
please?
denying of the fact. There is no denying of the fact that temples need to be freed, because not just for missionary for stopping what missionaries are doing in India, but also for taking care of the people who are supposed to take care of the temple. And but I have a little different view. I mean, I would not just depend upon the government for doing for freeing the temples and bringing back the resources to where it should be, to our religion and for its betterment. I would say we should, all the time has come now where we don't just expect the pujari to upkeep a temple and to keep the dharma alive in his premises, but also build an ecosystem which takes care of these people when there is a time, when the time comes, like what we saw in the lockdowns. And I'm working on it. I'm working on building an ecosystem where we connect the smaller pujaris to the bigger temples, and and we create an ecosystem within where the powerful voices will be connected to the voices that do not reach anywhere, or people who there are no takers. So that ecosystem needs to be built by the society, because no matter how much a government would do, a society can only get strengthened when a society will realize that we as society, we as the people, the people that can be the upholder of dharma and who want to hold the flag of dharma upright, we have to step forward and we have to do our bit, and that charity begins at home.
Thank you very much. Thank you all the viewers for joining today. And please like the videos, subscribe the channel, and support us. We are going to build the narrative, create the narrative. This is the beginning of a dialogue. And so, be ready. Send back your inquiries. We will talk about issues that are important, everything under the sun. Have a great weekend. Have a great week ahead. And see you next week. Aabhash ji and Sujata ji, many, many thanks.
Thank you. Pleasure.
I enjoyed this Bihari Baitak. I hope you did. And we will come back again.
Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.